Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and we are coming at you live for UFC Noche. We've got Wiz back in the saddle with us. My brother, how are you this evening?
It's like I got the akimbo in one hand and I got the beverage in the other because we're cool like that.
I
As you
love
guys
it.
can see, we're thriving on this Friday evening. It's been a good day. Finished up tape earlier today, and I feel like now that we have some time to talk these fights, I know it's later on in the week. We were supposed to do this on Wednesday. Uh, Brother Liam and we were both pretty cooked. Then we were like, okay, let's do this Thursday, same time, as usual. I was cooked to the bone, and I knocked out in bed probably by 8 o'clock. And then here we are now. But excited for this card. I feel like there's a lot of sneakier spots on this card. So excited to break them down with you, brother.
Absolutely. And the upside is, man, I, always do my writing later on in the week, right? So now I've done a deeper dive on some of these fights. I've done my write up. Writing forces you to really think and kind of like, consolidate your thoughts. And so, whether it's one side or the other, I really thought about how I think these fights could play out. And hopefully we can find some gold in there, my man. I'll tell you, looking at the fights this week, I found a lot of them to be, quite competitive, quite tricky, feel like fights could go either way. So I'm excited to break down, these fights and see if maybe you could sway me on some of them. But otherwise, there's a few fights where I do have, a little bit of a stronger opinion. So hopefully we see those the same way, certainly. But
Oh yeah.
without further ado, why don't I share the screen here? And we're going to get started, my man, with a fight that is rebooked. We were supposed to run this one a little while ago. I suppose my opinions changed slightly since the last time, which I thought Donchenko, was rightfully favored, and the fight was only on the board, I think, for a little while if the price even went up. It was announced, it was then quickly pulled, and looking at it now, I just feel like when I looked at Sezinando and watched his tape from outside the Ultimate Fighter, he seems to me like a guy who can mix in his own takedowns. He seems like a guy who has a sweep game from the bottom. It's not like if he gets put on the bottom, he's stuck there. He's got an ability to work from those positions. I think if he's on the feet, that's not the kind of fight he's looking for here. More often than not, I think he's still got some power in his hands. He could be an aggressive striker in his own right. I just think Daniil, that's his best attribute. Those elbows, he's very sneaky with those attacks. He's got those good knees to the body as well. He can kind of spin, create some havoc. So I feel like Donchenko, probably a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more dangerous on the feet. But I just have this gut feeling that Sedriques might get to his takedowns and, make this a dogfight, kind of make it grimy like that. And if he's able to do that, he might outperform this moneyline price. And so when I was looking at the fight, that's kind of the way I was seeing it, man. It looks like there was a lot of love that came in on Donchenko. Doesn't seem like the line's really moving a ton to support that. So I feel like, there might be some sharp money on the Sezinando side. And, again, when I just watched their Ultimate Fighter like material, I thought Donchenko was the side. When I went back and watched more of Sezinado outside the Ultimate Fighter, kind of got to feel like maybe he's got a well-rounded enough game to get this done. But ultimately, these fights are kind of a crapshoot. The Ultimate Fighter finales, I feel like a lot of times hard to get a great read on them. So let's see how it shakes out, my man. I think the training with the DC MMA Academy could be big for Sezinado here, but it's yet to be seen, right? So how do you feel about this matchup, brother?
I didn't really want to look into this one too much. I looked into it a little bit, I'll be honest. And you have a guy in Daniil Donchenko who very physical specimen who wants to keep it on the feet for the most part. And Rodrigo Sezinado, complete opposite. This guy, very credentialed jiu-jitsu player, good grappler. And the one thing I like about him is he has that jiu-jitsu style that's more smothering. He does look for submissions, don't get me wrong, but he's more positionally sound, and he wants to smother you on the ground and dig his elbows into your face and really make it uncomfortable so he can slice through your guard and get to the positions he wants to get to and ultimately finish the fight. I think if I were to bet anything on this fight, it's going to be Cezinado submission. Uh, Personally, probably going to stay away but I do think that Sezinando does have a path to victory here, and I would say dog or pass. But again, this is the Ultimate Fighter finale. You have to cap this like a regional fight. You can't cap it like a UFC fight. So all things considered, bananas can be thrown in there, and people will slip on them. So I would rather have the dog than look like a fool laying on the favorite.
Yeah, man. So we largely see this one the same way. I'm going to briefly glance at the prop market because I agree with you that the sub could be live here. Seems like it's taken some money. Opened up plus 1,000 on Bet Online. It's now down to plus 650. I'm seeing on domestics, it's like plus 700. I don't hate that. So I think that could be a way to get involved on the Sezinando side. The other thing I wanted to look at was Sezinando by decision. It's as high as plus 550 on DraftKings. And I feel like when you got two guys that have never been finished before, maybe the Sezinado side, he can get to the top position. You just can't get the guy out of there. And it's like, again, it's a pretty big number for a guy that, might just have the takedown upside and he could ride out some top time. By the way, both of his fights, I think, on Ultimate Fighter were decisions as well. So I think that could just be like another path to victory for him, right? It's only a 15-minute fight. And, Donchenko got one really quick knockout in a fight that was super high paced. And then there was like a low blow, or I forget what exactly was the foul, but there was some kind of stoppage in the action where both guys kind of got a chance to catch their breath. And that's just not going to be there in this fight. So I feel like he's going to be made to work and kind of be in some negative positions if Sezinando is able to get these takedowns off. And I think he's not going to, go out there and just try and swing and bang with this dude. I think he's going to try and force these takedowns like his life depends on it. So in that kind of fight, like, I just think there's some upside with the dog. And one other thing I'll mention, guys, just before we move to the next fight, if you guys play DFS, I do DFS breakdowns. And when I was looking at Sezinado, he's a massive leverage play on this slate. Donchenko's projected like top 4 ownership on the slate. And, when you just look at like how something could go wrong, it's like, well, what if everybody's on this Ultimate Fighter guy who just turned out to not be that good? And so I think Donchenko looks like a good prospect. I don't think he's a bad fighter, but he's 24 years of age. He could easily be rebuilt if he loses this fight. And it's like Sezinado, 27, a little bit more, age out there, a little bit more, maybe not experience in terms of professional fighting, but certainly has a lot of mat time, and maybe he can use that to his advantage. So I think for all those reasons, he was somebody I was looking at as like a DFS leverage play as well. So just for my DFS heads out there, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a nugget. And this is a fight where neither guy's got a game log, right? So maybe people, will hold that against them. But I think for Sezinado, his big ITD price is why people aren't giving him much credence. And I feel like if he's able to get takedowns going, even if he doesn't finish, he might be an optimal candidate. So, all right, my brother. Next up, we got Elise Pereira taking on Montserrat Rendon. And this is a fight where, I certainly don't want to be, overextending myself on a fight like this, right? It's lower level, right?
This is a fight.
I'll kick this one right to you, my man. What do you think about this matchup, Wiz?
Man, this is a fight, that's for sure. Oh, I don't think anything about this one. If you guys look at any of the tape from Alice Pereira, some of these fights are literally in a shopping mall. What? I guess janitors. So you can't really take too much into consideration with those, and how serious of a level of competition is that with a couple of her fights being flagged for legitimacy. Definitely not good. And I'm not trying to vouch for a bet on Montserrat Rendon at all. But at the same time, Montserrat Rendon is not UFC level anymore. She has fought UFC fighters and has fared well, 6-1. I just don't think she has that kind of game to beat Alice Pereira, and this might be one of the largest age gaps I've ever seen personally in my time capping fights. So take that into consideration, but that also can play into a disadvantage for Alice Pereira, being that she's very inexperienced. So take it with a grain of salt. But all that to be said, I think Alice Pereira probably gets this done because I think the younger fighter is always going to have the advantage because they can show one thing on tape and improve at a rapid pace, especially in this day and age with MMA. I think these younger fighters are starting to improve at a much more uh, I would say just at a higher rate. Like it's you see these people show very weak striking in one fight, and then they come back 3-4 months later, and all of a sudden they can strike and they have a serviceable game. So I think Alex Pereira can make improvements. And no, she's not Alex Pereira's sister. This is not her. But yeah, give me Alex Pereira here. But I am not touching this fight.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to have all the anthropomorphic advantages. You touched on the age, right? She's 19. She's fighting a 36-year-old woman. And, I think she's going to be the faster woman. She's got the 5'10" frame. She's got the 3-inch reach advantage. So there are certain things that are working in her favor. But to your point, she really hasn't fought anybody. Montserrat, Rendon, certainly her UFC fights have been against tougher women. You could argue, her fights prior to that have also been against tougher women. One thing I do want to note, Rendon's a little bit harmless, right? Like she's gone to decision in all 7 of her fights. And, if you watch her throw hands, it looks like it's in slow motion sometimes, right? Like it's just not very dangerous looking striking, speed creates that like whipping impact. And she really just doesn't have a lot of speed on her shots. And it's not slow and stiff. It's like, slow and slapping. It just doesn't really look like it's doing a lot of impact. So I think Pereira is probably the harder hitter. And the thing that ultimately will decide this fight, in my opinion, is who has wrestling superiority. Because, Rendon has gotten 3 takedowns, I believe, in both of her UFC fights. It's just that one of them, she wasn't able to hold enough control. She got outlanded in that fight. So, she basically needs those takedowns, that top control in order to dictate the fight that she wants to have. Because, like I said, she's not very dangerous or fast on the feet. So for Pereira, I would say that her ground game doesn't look very sophisticated. It just looks like because she's big and strong, she can kind of muscle people to the ground and, do what she wants in the guard and kind of just stand back up out of it. I don't think she's a very good passer. She looks to me like the best white or blue belt in the gym, which is, again, there's some upside to that, but it's just like, physicality, I think, is a lot of what's driving her abilities to win these fights and, to beat her opponent. So, against Rendon, she's still bigger, but she might be giving up a little bit of that in terms of physicality. I do think like Rendon's never been so live for a submission, just on the sense of like, what if she just takes her down into the full guard and makes a critical error when, you can kind of get away with that when you're fighting, people that really don't know what they're doing. But then you see even Pooja Tomar against Shauna Bannon, right? She hurts her bad, falls her to the ground, shortly thereafter the fight's over because she got armbarred, right? It's WMMA, baby. Like how many times have we seen somebody follow them to the guard, fall into an armbar? So I think that for Rendon, the 2 ways she wins this fight is like an armbar from the guard or she gets takedowns. Otherwise, I just don't think she's winning the fight. So for me, could Pereira be a favorite? Yeah. But the downside risk is that Pereira is like really bad and just like because she's fighting nobody, she looks like she's doing a good job. And meanwhile, for Rendon, she does look like she's fighting in slow motion against other women that are, competing in the UFC. So you just have to give a little bit more credence to that body of work. But ultimately, man, I'm not betting on Rendon, dude. I one time described her as looking like she's fighting underwater. Can't put my money on that. That seems like a recipe for getting knocked out. If this Pereira girl's power translates, that could be like a way that, you look for the prop market, right? Because instead of laying minus 150, then you're getting a bigger plus money number to hope. But for me, this is a fight I'm happy to pass on. Anything you want to add before we move to the next one, Wizz?
Oh, brother, no. This one, I'll be outside taking a walk.
Understood. I will just say, guys, for anybody who's interested, I'm seeing Rendon by sub is as high as plus 800 on DraftKings. Meanwhile, it is plus 650 on Bet Online, so a little bit of a difference there. Pereira KO is really not a great number. It's only plus 4XX. I do think that sounds kind of strong. Nice. I see my guy Joey in the chat. Got Sezinando on the money line. Very sharp. And the sub prop plus 700. Very nice, man. I'm looking at both of those as well. Liam, any chance at all Rendon can snatch any type of sub? Like, I don't know exactly what her grappling game looks like, but I have to imagine that at this point in her career, like 7 fights deep, she knows what an armbar from the guard is. So I don't think she's going to submit her, truth be told. But just in terms of like, again, would I bet Rendon plus 120? No. would I consider a small click at plus 800 on the sub, knowing how WMMA is, or even like the ends by sub or something like that? Yeah, I would consider that instead. I did enjoy the Alice Pereira training clip. Oh, my man, Green King in the gutter. I appreciate you, brother.
Horny
All right.
Horny Joe.
He's in there. He's in there. No process. Liam, my man, my brother, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for stopping by. We got a great fight to talk about here, in my opinion, Wiz. Alessandro Costa, fun guy, fun style, from a DFS perspective, he's been boom and bust, right? Like in his wins, over 100 points. When he loses, 33 points or less. It's just like he's one of those guys, right? And Alden Correa on the other side, like I watched back some of his tape and, admittedly, I'd like to watch back a little bit more of it before I would part ways with my dollar. But I just watched, enough of it to say, like, this guy seems to me like he's getting better fight over fight. He's 27 years of age. He's a young guy, primary training partner for Joshua Van. He's working at a 4-ounce fight club with Daniel Pineda in Houston, Texas. And so, we're fighting in Texas, right? This is a guy who said, this feels like a home game for me. He does all his fighting in Fury FC. So, if this fight was in, Guadalajara or so, maybe we're having a slightly different conversation. It's just not like that, right? He's doing something that he's used to doing, fighting in Texas. No problem there. So UFC jitters, are they possible? Yes, but I think it's like a guy that has been in these kind of cornering situations. He understands what a fight week looks like. He's got a training partner at this level. He understands, hey, I could be right there. And, I like what Joey said in the chat, and I'll talk about that in the main event as well. Costa got some wrestling training at Oklahoma State University, and so did Diego Lopes, right? And, that's obviously going to be something that can help your skills and abilities. But Costa, for me, is one of these guys that likes to go out there and kind of find out who's the tougher guy on the feet. More often than not, he's willing to go out there and swing with guys, take some chances on the feet. And he's also a guy that likes to invest in that low kick. I think the low kick is going to be key for him here because Coria really likes to sit behind that boxing. He's got long strikes. He's a guy that's got the ability to touch you from far away. He's going to have a pretty substantial height advantage in this contest. I want to look at UFC stats because I feel like he also has a reach advantage. It does not say that on Tapology, but that was my memory. Let me at least go take a look here. No, it says that they have the same reach, but we are going to see Costa punching up at Alden Correa, and we're going to see Correa, trying to keep him at the end of that boxing range. And I will note that this guy, he's gone out there and, Paris Moran was basically expected to run over him, a guy who's respected on the regionals, a guy who's expected to take that next step up. And he kind of smoked him out, and it didn't look like he changed anything about his striking process. It looked to me like he was kind of just sitting behind his shots, working his game, being defensively responsible, looking for his angles, and eventually just clipped him with a shot that really hurt him bad. And, I think that he's got sneaky power. I think he's kind of coming into his own on the feet. So could I see him getting his leg chopped out here? I could. It's a guy in Costa who's got some UFC experience under his belt. He's done that before. He's been out there with guys, and he's got that ability to potentially mix in his takedowns, to mix in that wrestling game, to look for his submission game. I think the guy's got a 6-0 record to the sub off the top of my head. So, Costa obviously has an ability to work in different phases. I think that could benefit him here. And if you look at Korea's losses coming in, he's been submitted before, so that's certainly an area you want to be concerned, right? But Joshua Van got submitted in Fury, and then, you look at it now, he's beating Brandon Royval, who's a black belt in the UFC with a lot of proven success, right? So he's made substantial improvements over time. And I do think when you're looking for man, who's an underdog that could come in and way outperform what people expect from them, how do you evaluate Costa's run in the UFC? He's clearly fought some good guys, right? But Amir Albazi kind of boxed circles around him, right? That was a short notice fight. You can kind of pass that up. Hey, it's a UFC debut. Maybe we throw that one out of the sample. Okay. Then you look at the Usyk fight, he was kind of getting touched up in that fight. He was kind of getting hurt a little bit at times in that fight. I believe Steve had him in a submission attempt at one point in that fight. So, we've kind of seen he's willing to fight through some adversity as well, but he's looking to go out there and impose himself and, take some risk doing so, put himself on the line, kind of come forward, wade into damage. And I think that that's the kind of style that could get you clipped against a guy who knows how to box and a guy who's willing to throw hands right down the middle. Like I think Coria is willing to do. So for me, this just feels like the kind of guy that could come in and, have been getting better in the gym and shows a better product and kind of just, surprises people here. So for me, I'm looking at a dogger pass situation at these huge money line indications. What I would say is, Costa is kind of this killer be killed archetype, right? Especially at the UFC level. He had one fight go to decision that was, a fight where there were moments of doubt, moments of danger where it could have ended. And otherwise he's been in some violent fights. So, I could definitely see either guy getting finished here, but I just think Coria is going to come in and, really give him everything he's got. So unless Costa is willing to, deviate from his normal game plan, look to take this to the ground, I think he's going to take some damage on the feet. And I think that could change the complexion of the fight. So that's the way I'm seeing it, my man. How do you see this one, brother?
Yeah, I do think the stand-up in this fight is quite close. Now, I do, on the other hand, think that Costa is the one that has all the finishing upside, I think, in this fight. He does have the power advantage. I do think he can hurt Coria. And I also do like the leg kicks that Costa always throws. So he does have qualities of someone who should be a favorite, but maybe not this wide of a favorite. Coria is someone who, if you know anyone from his gym, like they come out and they fight that way to the bone, and that is Alden Coria. He's going to go out there and he's going to be in your face. He'll stay in the pocket, and he's a good boxer. Now, if he doesn't allow Costa to be on the front foot and doesn't absorb too many leg kicks, I think he has a path. Because I think over time the volume will start to wear on Costa, who at some time there has been fights where he has shown to slow down in the third round, closer towards the end of the second round as well. So yeah, for all those reasons, I'd say dogger pass, but probably passing more often than not. But yeah, I wouldn't be parlaying Costa if that's what you're asking too.
My man. So we largely see this one the same way. I would say I'm slightly more bullish on the Correa side, but also just think, again, violence could be in play here. The thing I will note as well, when you talk about guys that could get a crowd pop, guys that could maybe get the crowd behind them with their style, I think Correa is another candidate for that because he comes out winging punches on the feet, willing to exchange, but also a guy that's going to try and push forward as well. So you have to imagine, if two guys are coming to push forward, something's got to give, right? Somebody's going to get put on that back foot, and I think that's going to make a huge difference. So great points from you, my man, and I'm excited to watch that one. Flyweight action tends to be fun, scrappy fights, and I think Costa maybe could try and smother him with the grappling, but a lot of times, guys, he's going out there to mix it up, find out who's the better striker on the feet, and, just the visions of the Albazi fight are the ones that really give me pause because Albazi kind of, really touched him up in the boxing. And I think that Coria just could replicate some of those, exchanges, right? And I think Albazi put him down with an uppercut, if my memory serves. And I just could see Coria landing similar shots. So that's the way I see it. All right, guys, next up. Oh, two guys that I don't want to bet on, right? So that's going to be tough off the rip. But Brother Wizz, we'll have you start us off here, my man. We got Zach Reese, Sedriques Dumas, everything to play for Dumas. He needs to make this weight just to get that check, right?
Man, why is this guy still in the UFC? With all due respect, first of all, he has a bunch of just bad publicity, getting arrested, domestic violence. Like if you're a garbage human like that, I'm just gonna call a spade a spade. And after losing the amount of fights he's lost, I still don't understand. Also, just even in his wins, the product that he has shown is not UFC level. Now, I think this fight's pretty straightforward. I think Reese is just a much more polished MMA fighter. He's still someone who is not durable, hands are down, can be hit. This has banana peel fight written all over it. But I think Reese should win. I think Reese should be able to win however which way he wants it, whether it's a knockout or submission. Dumas is someone who I don't think is taking his training seriously and has legal trouble. And he showed a week ago that he only has like 16 or something like that. A low amount.
I think it was $13. I think it was $13.
$13, and you just don't want to see the fighters have something negative like that going into a fight week weighing on them. It's just not the right thing. So yeah, I'm going Zach Reese inside the distance here.
Yeah, I'll just admit, guys, this is not a fight I'm very bullish on. I would almost not advocate laying Zach Reese like this price against almost anybody, but I've always been kind of anti-Zach Reese just from like a theoretical standpoint. When he came to the UFC, he was kind of an unknown guy, a lot of early finishes. I think he's shown that his decision-making in fights is sometimes good, sometimes a little bit spotty. He's had some moments in fights where you're like kind of scratching your head, like, how is this happening right now? And other than that, though, like the guy shows some real skills. Like he's clearly got a huge build. He's an athletic enough guy, big muscles, right? He can hit hard, can kick, can, punch. You can kind of mix it up, do some different things. And also, not that many big guys like this are looking for arm bars or looking to be aggressive with the submission game like Zach Reese is from the guard. And, he's had very deep armbar attempts multiple times between Contender Series and between the UFC. So I think that those are the things that are positive attributes about him, but just like negative attributes about Zach Reese, like I do worry about, what it looks like in an extended fight, where somebody tries to grapple him and like maybe passes his guard, because like I think he's got a good enough guard, but like, when you throw up a lot of aggressive submission attempts, if you can't get him or if somebody uses that aggression against you to pass, that could be, a problem, right? And if you look at Dumas, he's got a common opponent in Cody Brundage, and that fight doesn't make sense. Like if you just watch some other fights from Dumas, from Brundage, like Dumas doesn't always look that good for 3 rounds and whatever, but he was able to just go out there and out-grapple Cody Brundage, pretty summarily over the course of 15 minutes, right? And if you had asked me about that, like coming into the UFC, I'd be like, no way, this guy's a kickboxer. This guy goes out there, he throws head kicks, flashy stuff. He's got a decent standing guillotine because he's got, a long frame and build, but that's about it. And I did hear that there was a time he was super dedicated to his jiu-jitsu and was going in and training a lot and being really about it. And so I have no idea what to ever expect from this guy. But I will just note, like looking back at his resume, Michal Oleksiejczuk, I think Zach Reese would lose really badly to Michal Oleksiejczuk. That's my personal opinion, but like I don't think that would be very competitive. I think Michal would walk him down, hit him to the body, make him start second-guessing his life choices, and I think that fight would probably not last 2 rounds, right? Nursultan Ruziboev, the guy's 4-1 in the UFC. I think he lost one time getting out wrestled by Joaquin Buckley. Is what it is, right? A guy who had way more experience. Then you look at Josh Fremd. Fremd is a guy that is super inconsistent as well. He had a fight where, he's making Fluffy work for the full 15 minutes, doing the up down with him, getting some exchanges going, won a round against Fluffy. So it's like Josh Fremd sometimes looks good and then other times looks really bad. So those are the losses that Dumas has on his record, right? But he's got the win over Matej Panaz, which is a solid enough win, right? And I didn't expect him to get it. Not like that, certainly, right? Cody Brundage, the way he did it, again, would not be something I expected, right? So he was able to go out there and exceed my expectations. A Zaitar, that's a gross win. Who cares about that? And then Tululian, what do you really draw from that? So I just don't have a good read on SD Dumas. But what I would say is like, he matches Zach Reese on size in a lot of ways, which is something most guys can't do, right? Zach Reese is normally towering over these guys way bigger. And, Dumas at least has an ability to kind of match him on size. So I think I think striking exchanges early will be competitive between these guys. I just think that Zach Reese probably a better prepared athlete, probably coming in, with a little bit better conditioning and doing the right things and, eating his vegetables, going to bed on time and things like that, right? Like I feel like Zach Reese has checked those boxes, but just like Dumas probably has all the motivation in the world to come out here being a little bit more aggressive, looking for either that 50K for a performance or 50K for a fight of the night by taking some risks, going for big head kicks, going for flying stuff, like just being super aggressive. And I feel like that's a style that you could get to Zach Reese by doing. So for me, I kind of lean towards what Joey said in the chat, towards that under. Like, I think Dumas might sell out for some violence, might sell out to take a chance. And I just don't know that I trust Zach Reese enough where, again, I'd have to lay $1 more to get Zach Reese. And it's like, I could just lean into some violence. Somebody go out here and get the job done. And that's what I advocated when he fought Cody Brundage. Because I was like, Zach Reese just is like an undercoated fighter to me. Medina was able to take a metric ton of ass whooping and then, keep pushing and keep going for takedowns and stuff. I just don't think that, Zach Reese expected that, right? He kind of landed everything he had and Medina was still there. Against Dumas seems like a guy who checks out when he gets hit really hard. He doesn't want to be there. So I feel like he's going to come out, try his stuff, and if he can't get it off, he's probably going to give up. What do you think, man? Pretty close?
I would say this does go under 1.5. I think both guys probably understand that, win or get cut.
And I think both guys kind of a defensive liability as well. Like Zach Reese, the other loss that he had, Azamat Bakoev, kind of short ground and pound, just put him viciously out cold. So, Bakoev is looking like a scary guy, but that's also not how he normally wins, right? Like you look back, Dylan Budka, I think, took him the full 5. And meanwhile, a couple of big ones, Zach Reese was scrambled. So, all right, man. Next up, we got an interesting fight here where the master of the guillotine choke, Jesus Aguilar, is taking on Luis Gurule. Tough UFC debut for our guy, Luis Gurule, man. Was looking pretty good, I thought. He was doing well, having some moments, landing some shots on the feet. But when he went out there and got clipped by Ode Osborne, that was the end of that. So now he's looking to go from, the frying pan into the fire, right? I think it's a little bit of a different matchup, right? Where you have Ode Osborne, huge guy, long guy for the division, very powerful, very fast twitch. Now you got Jesus Aguilar, who's kind of like takes the fight that you give him, like willing to go mix it up in the grappling and the wrestling exchanges. And I feel like he's kind of drawn dead to the guillotine in this one, unless Luis Gurule has kind of gotten scared by that knockout loss and he's going to come in a different guy and, be a little more tentative. I think what he's shown is that he's a pretty aggressive guy on the feet with his boxing. He normally can land some good shots. He's pretty durable. I'd say he's been hurt a few times regionally when he's going against heavier punchers, but Jesus Aguilar has one knockout against literally the chinniest guy in UFC history, with all due respect, Shandor Ross. Like, guy's definitely up there for the chinniest. So when you just look at I should say for the flyweights, right? Like maybe there's a guy in a different division, but like one of the chinniest flyweights you will ever see in the division. Matt Schnell is like, a ring below, and that says something. So you just look at, Luis Gurule and, that fight, like Ode Osborne has clipped a bunch of guys. Like he's hurt a bunch of guys. He's a very dangerous striker. So now I'm looking at Aguilar and I'm saying, like, if he's not going to win these wrestling exchanges and he doesn't normally get ahead on the strike count and, he's normally looking to pull guard into that guillotine to try and finish it, I feel like he's going to end up on his back here more often than not. I feel like they're trying to give Gurule one that he could win. But Aguilar is a guy that, for the full 15 minutes, he's looking to go for that choke. So he will have opportunities probably. He might have one or two that, people start sweating. But I feel like Gurule in camp is probably just having people guillotine him every day. Because if you're not, that'd be pretty foolish. But otherwise, that's the one thing he's really got to watch out for here. Otherwise, I feel like he's got a pretty solid game for sprawling, brawling, keeping it upright, winning on the feet, or going to takedowns if he needs them. So I think that Gurule is the pick here. What do you think about this one, man?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like Aguilar, like you said, is guillotine or bust, not even just sub or bust. Gurule has the advantage in every single facet of mixed martial arts here, and he's a much better striker. And as long as he is not affected by that knockout loss from Ode, I think he wins pretty easily here, however which way he wants, but most likely it's going to be a decision. Ode, like you said, has sparked a lot of people. He almost sparked Steve Erceg. He looked good in that first round, and a lot of people underestimate his speed and his power. So Aguilar does not have either of those. So yeah, give me Gurule however which way he wants. Pretty straightforward.
There we have it, my man. The last thing I'll say is that one time Jesus Aguilar did get a pretty sketchy decision, that went his way against Mateus Mendonça, and it is UFC Noche. So that is the only caveat I will give, guys. It's a big favorite price tag. And I'm always the guy that will tell you about all sides of the coin, right? I will look behind every nook and cranny, and I will just say, like, Jesus Aguilar maybe gets a little bit of a favorable judging experience sometimes. So you just want to be careful with that. But otherwise, I think Gurule is the side here. All right. Next up, we've got Tatiana Suarez taking on Amanda Lemos. And I believe Tatiana Suarez wrestled for the Mexican national team. This is off the top of my head. So if I'm speaking out of turn, I will definitely correct the record. But I believe, let me just go back and check that. But in any case, she's certainly a very good wrestler, very good grappler. And she's coming off a devastating loss, right? One where she kind of got outclassed by, the current champion, Zhang Weili, and sent her back to the drawing board after a really successful UFC career. A lot of people were high on her. And, now she's got to take on Amanda Lemos, who's a very, talented fighter in her own right. Brother Wizz, we'll have you start us off here, my man. Or actually, no, you're good. You're good, brother. I got you. All right, you're good?
I'm
all right,
ready.
Fire
I'm
up,
ready.
Wizz.
Listen,
I got you.
That bite can wait. It'll be worth it. So, look, starting off the week when I was just, wiki capping the fight, I initially was interested in Lemos, And, I still feel that Lemos has a path here, and she does. If she's able to keep this fight upright, she's the better striker, better power. She can hurt Tatiana in all sorts of ways. But if Tatiana is able to land the takedowns early and often, I think Lemos is going to have a long night. She'll probably get subbed. So it's one of those fights where it's Tatiana ITD or Lemos KO. You want to take the under 2.5. Something along those lines, I think, are viable. Lemos going to be a lot faster here in the pocket. And if she's able to pressure Tatiana and keep her on the back foot, that will even be better for her because it's a lot harder shooting takedowns when you're off the back foot. So if she's able to have Tatiana have her back against the cage, that's going to serve her well. But yeah, maybe a live look on Lemos if she's able to fend off the first couple of takedowns. That might not be a bad look.
That is interesting, my man, because I saw the exact same reads. Like, look, whenever you see Amanda Lemos KO at like 10-1, you're just like, that's kind of interesting. Just like in general, you're like, that's pretty big. And when you look at just how she fights, like she's basically a girl that can hurt almost anybody, right? Like she has big knockout power in her hands and her kicks. Also, she's just a physical woman. So if she's able to get on top, start smashing elbows, things like that. You look at her chokes. I wouldn't call her a very good jiu-jitsu player, to tell you the truth, right? Like I think her jiu-jitsu is okay. I think her ability to hold a choke and like squeeze is pretty good, right? Like she's choked women. I think it was Miranda Granger. She like squeezed her so hard, turned her purple and choked her fully unconscious. So Amanda Lemos is very strong. And I don't think that she had any hooks or anything there. I think she just grabbed her neck and squeezed until she was asleep. So you look at Tatiana Suarez on the other side, I think she's much more technical in both her wrestling and her jiu-jitsu. I think I spoke out of turn. She's of Mexican descent, but I believe she wrestled for the United States. I couldn't fully get clarification. I was glancing at a Wikipedia article while also listening. So when I'm looking at, what Tatiana brings to the table, she obviously has world-class wrestling. The thing that concerns me for her is just her health, right? Like she's dealt with a lot of things where Amanda Lemos, dude, has had 10 fights, I believe. And again, this is off the top of my head. Like always in the articles, I fact check myself as I'm writing, but this is, just pulling from the top of my head. And I believe Amanda Lemos has fought like 10 times since 2021. She's been extremely active, just fought for the title as well. And meanwhile, Tatiana Suarez, she's fought 3 times, I believe, since 2021. And I wouldn't say that her best performances have been those fights, right? Like I'd say, if anything, she's given slightly concerning footage against a Montana De La Rosa. But she won, right? And she got to where she needed. And Montana is a strong girl and does know how to wrestle and grapple. So it was an impressive win, but she needed to go out there and earn it. And it took her some time. Jessica Andrade, maybe the most inconsistent woman in the division, but it's obvious that she had wrestling superiority and grappling superiority against Andrade. And in that case, it's like, well, we saw what Jessica Andrade did to Amanda Lemos, right? I bet the sub there at plus 600. I do think that Tatiana Suarez by submission is her most likely path to victory here. She's very insistent under guillotine choke recently. Shout out to Patchy Mix. I know that people want to down on Patchy and all this stuff, man. I'm a ride or die. I've been with Patchy since King of the Cage. I still believe in his skills. Everybody's got, a style that can make them look foolish, right? And when you look at Tatiana Suarez, man, her physicality has normally been a huge weapon for her. Zhang Weili had the better physicality. And I think part of it was that Zhang Weili is a special athlete, but I also think that part of it is like, Tatiana Suarez peaked athletically at a younger age, right? And she's dealt with health problems and she's had these things go on in her life. So if you're asking me for a winner, I would pick Tatiana Suarez. I would say Tatiana Suarez by submission. But if you're asking me, like, what's the downside risk, is that if Tatiana Suarez has lost a step athletically, Amanda Lemos is still a very dangerous woman, and she's still a woman that takes her career quite seriously from all accounts. And so that's the kind of woman where, if you slow down a step and those takedowns aren't coming as easy, it's not like Montana De La Rosa where the consequences aren't that dire, right? And you can kind of keep getting your attempts going and keep rolling and keep pushing your pace. It's like you have to push pace in a wrestling match differently than in a martial arts contest where you can get hit, right? Like Tatiana could just absorb damage in this fight, unlike a lot of fights. So I think that that's the biggest concern coming into this one is just, does she get hit very hard and how does she react at this stage? Also, guys, we talk about it in men's fights a lot, how people have an underperformance sometimes coming off of a title fight where maybe they're not as up for it. Guys, she's on a prelim for the UFC Noche, right? Whereas what was she doing last time? She's in, a huge pay-per-view event. So definitely a step down the card. Definitely, not a huge step down in competition, right? Amanda Lemos, another title challenger type fighter. So it's like back out of the frying pan and into the fire. I think Tatiana Suarez can win here for sure. Shout out to my guy Pepe in the chat. He said, my opinion is Suarez should have bulked and stayed at 125. She seems weak at 115. I do think, what else gets harder as you get older, guys? Cutting weight. It's not easy. And when you're 34 and you've had health problems and these other things, yeah, I definitely think that could be a big problem. I don't like how Suarez looks on the feet. I agree. Lemos can still crack. I'm going to take the dog shot. I think all that's fair. So for me, guys, it's a money line dogger pass situation. It's a Lemos KO if you're looking for a prop on her side. And then if you're looking at the Suarez side, I think you look for, hey, if my book offers a specific, guillotine method, I think that that's her most likely win. I think that the sub is fine. I think that more often than not, it would be early, guys. Like I think sub 1, sub 2. Look at the Jessica Andrade fight. Looked like a complete mismatch in the grappling. As soon as she grabbed a hold of her, fight was over shortly thereafter. Lemos, I think, has made minor improvements on the ground. I just think that when you look at Suarez at her best, her process grappling, I love the sequencing that she goes for that front headlock submission. I steal a lot of stuff from Patchy, and I think that she did too. And I think that it's a good attack. And my guy Pepe says it here. Lemos has a long neck. She does. And I think that, Tatiana Suarez, if she's leveraging that full guard, lean back, hips in, I think that the crowd will go nuts for it. And I also think she can get her to tap. So for me, that's the way I'd look at this fight from both sides. Anything that you want to add here, my brother?
I just have heard that Tatiana has been in the gym consistently this whole camp, so that's always a good look. But yeah, exciting fight.
I love it. And Joey says Suarez maybe head and arm. Okay, I see you, Joey. I can see that. And one thing I'll also note is Tatiana Suarez used to have vicious, nasty ground and pound. If she's able to get to the easy takedowns here, maybe she does show that. But ultimately, I just lean towards she's kind of been getting more and more jiu-jitsu oriented with those attacks over the recent portion of her career. And I think when it comes to fighting Amanda Lemos, you'd rather be in a submission battle than in a damage battle. So I'm going to take her by sub in terms of my prediction. Next up, my man, we've got Claudio Puelles taking on Joaquin Silva, Neto BJJ. And this is a great fight as far as I'm concerned. To find out, where Claudio Puelles is at. Silva is not going to be a pushover for anybody, right? He goes out there and fights hard, tries to give an honest account of himself every time. UFC veteran, has been around for a long time. But, he's also the kind of guy where Arman Sarukian got hurt really bad and was still able to look like he was a minus 1,000 favorite, right? Because he could be on absolute dream street. And when he shot the takedown, he still got the top position. He still, was able to control the fight and dictate where it took place. And I feel like for Claudio Puelles, he's kind of been, predictable insofar as guys know he wants to go out there and take the fight to the ground. Guys know he wants to go out there and wrestle them, grapple them, get a hold of them. And, the guy's 29 years of age. He's already had some UFC experience of his own, right? He's gotten out there. He's gotten some wins. He's gotten some losses. He's gone the full 15 minutes. And I think that you can look at the losses he has recently. Dan Hooker, Fares Zion. you can forgive those losses. You know, Perez Ziam, in my opinion, is a fringe top 15 guy. Dan Hooker is a top 5 guy, a top 10 guy at the very worst. It's like he's dealing with difficult opponents. He didn't have it, right? He came up short in those. But now he's taking some time off. And when you look at him coming back here, you know, he's a guy that's willing to enter legs and be awkward and tricky with his submission attempts, but he's also a guy who's willing to stick to that body lock, you know, mat return guys, kind of just hold on to him, drag him down to the ground, make him tired. And frankly, I think that that's a path to victory against Silva. Like, I think you can kind of go out there, and if you don't stick your head in a guillotine and you don't make some huge error on the ground, you can kind of wear on this guy, put some lactic acid buildup in those big muscles, and, you know, make him feel sorry for himself a little bit. And I just think that that's how Puelles can win this fight, you know, use his wrestling, use his grappling. I mentioned on my guy J Hive show earlier in the week, I think that Puelles, you know, decision only market was kind of a crazy price early. The guy doesn't throw that many strikes. That's the downside risk. But it's like, if he's going to get knocked out, so be it, right? Like, otherwise, I feel like he's going to go out there and probably control more of the minutes in this fight by being assertive in the wrestling and the grappling, holding on to this guy, getting a rear waist lock, using it to spin around to his back. And I feel like eventually he might get him tired enough that he can, you know, pull off a finish. So for me, I do think that Puelles is probably the side here. But I acknowledge that, you know, Silva's not a bad fighter. He's got a good guillotine choke. He's got some powerful hands. You know, he's won some serious fights. You know, beating Jared Gordon, that's nothing to sneeze at. But I just think Puelles on the other side, he's got more upside. You know, he has a little bit less miles on the tires, and I feel like he's got a little bit more to give right now. So give me Claudio Puelles as the pick. What do you think, Wiz?
You know, earlier in the week, I was looking at this fight, and I didn't really understand why it was, you know, closely lined. I thought Silva was the right side, and you know, after taping, and I didn't really like the look against Drakkar Klose. Getting dropped by Guida wasn't a good look either, even though he won the fight. Didn't look good against Arman, even though he dropped him once. But on the feet, this is Silva's fight to lose. The issue is that he does get taken down quite a bit, and I think Puelles is gonna really not waste any time here. So if he's able to take him down, I'm not saying that he's going to insta-sub him. He could control him to death. Silva's nickname is Neto BJJ for a reason. He has some pretty slick defense when it comes to the submissions. And Arman, you know, didn't really get off too much damage in that fight when he had the top position. So I do think that it might be a little bit trickier for Puelles to get the submission, maybe a round 2, round 3 sub look. But now I'm kind of in the middle where I could see paths for both fighters, Silva on the feet or Puelles on the mat. And I don't want to, you know, pick a side. I don't want to draw a line in the sand because I think it is closely lined for a reason. The line is pretty accurate, I would say. And I think, you know, it would be a good fight to watch from the couch and maybe enjoy a beer.
Yeah, man, I'm looking right now. I have seen Puelles sub is taking action. It opened up plus 235 on Bet Online. Then it peaked at plus 300. Now it's coming back down to plus 280. But you're seeing plus 330s on the domestic books, plus 350 best available. Meanwhile, Silva KO opens up over at plus 550 on Bet Online. It's been bet down to plus 400. Meanwhile, you're seeing some of the domestics hanging plus 500s and better. So definitely ability to get in on some steam chasing action in the prop market if that's your thing. I do think, you know, Wiz laid out, those are definitely plausible ways that this fight could end in either direction. And, you know, I think that this fight maybe could have a few different ways it plays out. But the one thing I just looked at was like, from how I envision this fight, DFS as well as the decision only market, I feel like those could be ways to attack Puelles. Based on the way I see him winning this fight. And lastly, I will just mention Puelles' decision is also taking action on the domestic market. Opened up plus 250 down to plus 240. FanDuel opened plus 270 down to plus 260. So that's getting chipped away at just a little bit as well. And I could see it ending that way. All right, guys. Next up, we got Jose Medina taking on Dusko Todorovic. Oh, we're going to find out if Dusko Todorovic has anything left to offer in the UFC. Wiz, do you want to start us off on this matchup? I bet.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of saw the chin go away last fight for Medina, but I mean, you know, it's not a bad look. It was just Atiba Gauthier, who's a killer. Medina is just not really an MMA fighter. He's just someone that goes out there and He likes to brawl and he likes to get into a war. He has no defense, but he has shown in most of his fights good durability, and he just walks forward and he continues to tank damage while giving some out. Dusko, I don't know if he's really the most polished fighter at all. We kind of have enough film to prove that. But I think where he'll win this fight is if he takes Medina down into the mat. That's where he really shines, and I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to be able to get the takedown here. Medina has really shown no takedown defense in the UFC. So I do think that Todorovic is going to be able to make his way to the mat and get himself to a dominant position and maybe finish the fight. I would say via ground and pound, I think, with some elbows.
Nice, man. One thing I want to note again for my DFS heads, I isolated Dusko as like a pick where I think, a lot of people are probably going to be scared of playing Dusko because he's lost many times in the UFC, right? So that's understandable. He's also a big price. But the one thing I will note is he's fought a pretty tough quality of opposition, just generally speaking, in the UFC. And he also dealt with some adversity, right? He had an injury. When you look at Jose Medina, there's no evidence that you could point to that says he's a UFC level fighter. So it's not to say that he can't win this fight. Like it's two men fighting in a cage, right? Like he could land a punch and win the fight. So obviously he can win, but just, I like to talk about proven commodities on this show sometimes. And like Medina's last win before the UFC was a split decision against a regional fighter that's not very good. And you just have to look at that and say, how good is Jose Medina? Not very good. And then you look at his results in the UFC and you look at like, okay, his best moments is like the fact that I think he got a takedown against somebody. Let me go look at this UFC stats page because I don't want to slander the man, right? I want to give him credit for what he's accomplished. So he had one takedown against Zachary Reese. That was also his high mark in terms of significant strikes. Guys, he landed 32. So Jose Medina has never landed more than 32 significant strikes in a UFC fight. He has given up 5 takedowns against Zachary Reese. He gave up 6 takedowns against Magomed Gadzi-Sulov, and he got knocked out in the first round against Atiba Gauthier. There's nothing about that data set that tells me he's a good fighter. It tells me, in fact, that he does not attempt very much offense. He is very susceptible to getting hit, and he can get taken down and kind of destroyed on the mat as well. If you look at like skills coming into this fight, Dusko Todorovic, I'm looking now at his UFC biography page. He has a BJJ black belt and a Taekwondo black belt. I would guess that Jose Medina is a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I might be being generous with my assessment. I don't think that he's a very high-level ground player. I don't think that he's going to break out some, omoplata, gogoplata, flying triangle series, right? So when I just look at this fight, Dusko Todorovic, if he can't win this fight, should just no longer be in the UFC, right? Like you talk about sometimes the merging of pro wrestling and the UFC, right? There's something called like enhancement talent in pro wrestling. Guys that just come out and do the JOB, guys that come out to lose every time. And again, I'm not saying that Medina's that, right? He's a man. He's going out there to fight and compete. But like he didn't show skills that were UFC level against Gadzi-Sulov except for durability. So like he's never shown anything that was like a positive attribute except for the guy that he could take a good beating, right? And my guy Cam says it, jobbers, right? That's until proven otherwise, that's what he is, right? Just because of where he's at. He's 0-2 in the UFC. He's 0-1 on Contender Series, and his last win was a split decision over some regional guy that's not good enough to be at this level. So you just have to question, like, this guy has never shown me that he's UFC level, and he's gotten finished regionally as well. Dusko, yeah, he's got some losses, guys. He's got some bad ones, but they are at the UFC level against mostly guys that have winning records in the promotion, that are solid enough fighters, that are dangerous guys. And his wins aren't that great. Like, we could definitely acknowledge that too. But he's at least got a win over Michel Pereira, a guy who's 9-5 in the UFC, like a guy who's had success in multiple weight classes, right? I think that Dusko kind of deserves that respect as like, yeah, this guy's had some bad runouts, but he at least has shown he's a UFC level guy. And even his fight against, going back and looking at common opponent, he fought Zach Reese. He lost the unanimous decision. Dusko got 4 takedowns there, right? So he kind of showed wrestling superiority there, right? Zach Reese goes 5-1 on takedowns with Medina. He goes 4-2 on takedowns with Dusko. He needed to land the superior shots on the feet. He needed to rely on getting back up. So I feel like Dusko has just shown us he's a better fighter. He's definitely a liability. I'd never lay a -4, -3 with a guy like Dusko. But again, I'm looking at from a DFS standpoint, I got to consider a guy like this where takedowns could be free 99, where he could just go out there, get on top of this guy, land a million significant strikes, right? Collect a submission attempt, and then be done with it. Like that seems like, Dusko has a real path to doing that in this fight. So ultimately, that's what I'm leaning towards. Anything you want to add before we move to the next fight?
I just, think Dusko should be able to get this done in the first round. So I would look at first round pops, but also look at the second round in case Medina is able to fend off the first takedown or two, or, Dusko finds some trouble tracking him down because Medina does circle pretty well. So actually,
how about this, Wizz? The under 1.5 rounds is +190.
Yeah, that's
that offers up a lot of equity. And then if Dusko gets his chin popped, it's like,
thank you. I completely forgot about a total. Wow, what are totals?
Dude, I'm looking right now. If you look at Dusko round 1, it's as good as +410 as well. So a couple different options out there for people that are looking to get involved. I will also note Dusko's sub has been getting cracked down in the market. I think it definitely could be a TKO. So you want to make sure you have, different exposure. His ITD prop is getting hit as well at +150 and +160. So there's some plus money on the board here for a guy in Dusko who in his wins, he tends to be high scoring DFS commodity, 100+ points type of guy, and a guy that can finish fights as well with his ground and pound, with his submission game. So I just think that's worth keeping in the back of your mind here.
Yeah, I would say I really am leaning towards the knockout in round 1. I think it's a ground and pound. I don't know why. It's just every time I run this fight in my head, it's a ground and pound knockout, and at +700, I'm gonna take some of that.
Nice. I absolutely love it. All right, my brother. Next up, we got Santiago Luna taking on Quang Bang Lee. And I have to say, man, this is one of those fights where I may live to regret it, but the more research I did, the more I kind of changed my mind here. Like, I initially looked at Luna as a guy where I'm like, he's a physical athlete. He's got the Mexican flag. People are going to get behind this guy. He's 21 years of age. He could probably take some shots, give some shots. I saw those knockouts he got regionally. I'm like, man, he seems like he's got some pop in his hands. Then you look at his overall body of work. He's got 2 knockouts overall. Neither one of them's against a good fighter. And then you just look at the fact it's like, this guy's not really fighting the creme of the crop, right? And I saw him against an amateur, right, in 2023. So I wouldn't bring it up if it's an amateur fight and he had it in 2011. And it's like, yeah, like, well, who cares? It's relevant data, right? It's like recent fight. And in 2023, he got hurt badly, man. He got 10-8'd in that. And again, if it's a professional round, it's not 3 minutes. Like, the guy can just keep landing for a long time after that. So it's just like, there was a bit of concern there, right? And when you talk about guys that can have, UFC jitters, like, how about a guy that's 6-0 and 21 years of age and really has never fought at this level before against a guy in Quang Bang Lee who has been fighting guys with winning records since the LFA, like, consistently. And now he's been in the UFC for 3 fights and he's fought some serious guys. Chris Gutierrez, guys, is 10-3-1 in the promotion. He's a real fighter. Quang Bang Lee took him down twice. So you just look at that and you're like, this guy's proven at the UFC level he can take guys down. He can land some, shots. He can go out there and get control time and positions. He just submitted Gaston Bolanos, a guy who's 2-2 in the UFC. So he's done all that. And, he's 33. He's not 50, right? So it's like he's not an ancient history, right? He's getting up there for bantamweight. You can acknowledge that. But he trains out of the academy in Minnesota. Serious, camp as well. Guys like John Castaneda and other guys that have winning records in the promotion train out of the gym. So when you just look at where Luna's at, he's an interim gym guy. They've got some solid fighters, but I feel like it's a prove-it spot for Luna where, I've seen this guy be in bad shape before. He goes out there and relies on his submission game, his wrestling game more often than not. It's like, is he definitely better at wrestling and grappling than Quang? Like, I'm not convinced about that. Like, I think he's a better athlete, but I'm just not convinced that, like, he's going to just easily wash him in those positions. Like I feel like Quang Bang Lee knows how to grapple, he knows how to wrestle. So when I just look at the archetype of this matchup, it seems to me like the size, the athleticism, the durability are the things that I would check box for Luna. But the experience, the savviness, the guy who's probably a little bit more well-rounded and crafty and honestly a little bit more proven in terms of all things because of who he's fought and his opportunities, like just seems like Quang Lee is being a little bit slept on here. And the other thing I'll note, guys, he was supposed to fight David Martinez. So it's not like they were bringing him in to do him a favor, like easy fights. No, they weren't bringing him in for a favor, but he was preparing for the date. And then you've got, Luna on the other side, I believe 2 weeks ago, he gets the call, hey, man, you want to step up and do this? And now people are sold on the guy because he's got some good tape against 4-8 fighters and 4-6 fighters and, guys that are just not proven at this level. So for me, man, the more I looked at it, the more I thought to myself, this kind of has Quang Bang Lee split decision written all over it. Like just finds a way to win, grits it out, maybe lands one big shot, gets a knockdown, gets a takedown, 2 takedowns, like, makes this kid work. Kid has an adrenaline dump. Like these are all ways I could see Quang winning this fight. And the other thing is I check the market, right? Like I'm just a guy that glances at the market and seemed like everybody and their dog is betting on Luna here. And it's like 2 weeks ago, most people had never heard of this guy. And now they're like, oh, Mexican flag, cool name. This guy's ready for prime time. And I feel like Quang Bang Lee has kind of been slept on his whole time. Like even the Chris Gutierrez fight, I don't think many people expected him to get 2 takedowns. I think they thought he was going to get smoked out in that fight, and he didn't, right? He ended up competing for a decision. So I think that this is the kind of fight where maybe Santiago Luna can come in and impress, get a big knockout. I think that's kind of his upside here is like, hey, he just tests the chin early. He's a fast guy. But other than that, like I think he's in for a dogfight with a guy who's willing to go out there and fight hard and look for takedowns of his own and not going to be easy to just get free takedowns on. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I was, in the same boat here. I started the week liking Lee. I ended the week liking Lee. Not by, a huge margin. I do think it's a close fight. Luna is impressive on the feet. I think his power is there. And Quang Lee is someone that can be dropped and can be hurt, but also can drop and can hurt people too. Luna, I haven't really seen too much of his grappling. I don't recall too much from the tape. So if Quang Lee can get some takedowns here, that could be a viable path as well because his grappling is pretty good, at least against the lower level of fighters that we've seen. So pretty nice fight to tape and to try and pick apart because both guys present a compelling argument. And what I came out with after watching tape is, I kind of like the violence angle here in this fight. I think both guys can finish, and I think both guys can get finished. Whether it's Santiago Luna knocking Quang Lee out on the feet, Quang Lee getting the submission, or knocking Luna out on the feet as well. So fight doesn't go to distance at -130 is something that I'm going to be looking at. Haven't pulled the trigger yet, though. For purposes of the show, I will say that I think Quang Lee wins the fight by submission.
Nice. Okay. I like where your head's at, my man. I think that my write-up involved Quang Lee sub decision. I'd have to go back and double check though, which I will do as we are live here on the air. But we can move along to the next fight, my brother, where we got Alexander Hernandez taking on Diego Pereira. And this is a fight where it's going down in the lightweight division. Hernandez kind of tried that featherweight experiment. For me, dude, like some guys are just a little bit too muscular to make those kind of cuts. And I felt like he was one of those candidates. I didn't like the move to featherweight for him. Now back at lightweight, I've kind of liked a little bit more of what I've seen from him. Also, he was able to stop the trending Chase Hooper, right? Chase had looked, career best since moving up to 155 pounds. Looked like he filled into his own, was beating up on the old guys, said, hey, give me one of these younger guys. I'm ready for it. And Alexander Hernandez said, back in line, young man. And he just showed him like, hey, I still got the power. I still can D up some of these takedowns, keep it on the feet, show where, I can win fights. And I think people forget this is a guy that's knocked out Beneil Dariush. He does have power in his hands. He's got power in his strikes, knees up the middle. He can kind of mix up a few different attacks that are dangerous, and he gets respect from guys. And on the other side, Diego Pereira is a solid fighter with a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, is, BJJ is probably his number one selling point. He's got good boxing as well. He's used that to his advantage, his long arms for the division. He's got that reach advantage in this fight. But ultimately, man, like, I think the speed is going to be a big advantage for Hernandez. I think we've seen Diego Ferreira kind of start out slow in his recent fights. And then when guys start to tire out from beating up on him, he kind of builds back in and, finds his way. And he's a savvy veteran. But taking whoopings to come back on guys is probably not super sustainable at 40 years of age in this division. And I feel like Hernandez is probably juiced to the tits. He's a San Antonio native. So you got Texas on Texas crime here, where Diego Ferreira is a Fortis MMA representative out of Dallas. And meanwhile, you got Alexander Hernandez, who's a native son of San Antonio. So for me, I think that, he's probably going to get the crowd pop here. And I think that Hernandez, has a chance to go out there and knock out Diego Ferreira. But I also think, he's now at a point in his career where he doesn't feel the need to go out there and force things and make it crazy. He's more than willing to win a 29-28 decision, outpoint you a little bit, grease it out, do what he needs to. So I think as long as he can keep this fight upright and avoid, letting Diego Ferreira get on his back or put him in a compromised situation on the ground, I think it should be his fight to dictate, what happens, win or lose. How do you feel about this one, Wiz, where Diego Ferreira, looking to keep building some momentum, but certainly not been as active as a guy like Hernandez? Another matchup like Lemos and Suarez, where there's just been a huge gulf in the activity level recently.
We talk about Alexander Hernandez now, who has built himself a 3-fight win streak and looking career best, as you mentioned. This is someone who was on the brink of getting cut, and a lot of people thought he should have already been cut from the UFC after his run at 145. So I'm good for him, and props to him for, overcoming adversity after, not the most fortunate start to his career in the UFC. Now going up against the vet here, 40 years old, and Diego Ferreira, who on the mat is an ace. He's really good. His jiu-jitsu game and his grappling is pretty elite. He looks to get the back and controlling fights, but getting it there has always been the issue. And on the feet, I think this is Hernandez's fight to lose. Pereira is a little bit slower, and against what was his name? Why am I forgetting? The fight before Rebecca, I believe. Michael Johnson. Against Michael Johnson, he was losing.
He was getting pieced.
He was getting pieced up the whole fight until he landed that knockdown and knockout in the third round. So that's not the best look either. I know Michael Johnson is a vet, but, still not a good look. Hernandez is aggressive. Hernandez is a dog, and he can tank damage. But Pereira has one thing in the striking, and it is power, so he could maybe put Hernandez down and make this fight tricky on the judges. All that to say, I am passing on this fight. I cannot get an Alexander Hernandez fight right to save my life. I always end up on him, and he loses. I always end up against him. He wins. Can't seem to read this guy right. So I have forbidden myself from betting on his fights moving forward. Also, for those who are not tuning in to LFA, Gable Stevenson is about to make his debut. Both fighters are in the cage. They're about to start the first round.
How about this, Wiz? I was getting ready. We're going to do a quick live call of this Gable Stevenson fight, guys. Absolutely critically necessary. I've got my NCAA wrestling t-shirt on. You know that we absolutely have to rep hard for our own. And I think that this is the kind of fight where it is an occasion for combat sports fans, guys. One of the biggest prospects coming over, 25 years of age. This is an Olympic gold medalist, a NCAA champion. And he's coming off of a loss, his last wrestling match, guys. He got beat by Wyatt Hendrickson. Now he's taking on 37-year-old Braden Peterson in this matchup. He's giving up 2 inches of height. He's giving up 1 inch of reach. It is going to be interesting to see how a guy like Gable pans out. And shout out to Brother Wiz, the USA Wrestling t-shirt on, absolutely fitting. We're doing a brief interlude, guys. We're going to call this Gable Stevenson action, and then it is right back to the fights that you are here for. So absolutely fired up for this, guys. And you have to agree that Gable Stevenson versus Braden Peterson is a bigger fight than Kelvin Gastelum against Dustin Stoltzfus, even though Kelvin missed by 6 pounds. Yeah, it's still bigger than that. So I think that this should be great television, and I'm excited to find out.
Life-changing
Oh,
money for Dustin Stoltzfus. Life-changing money.
dude,
35%
justice
of
for
him.
Stoltzfus, dude. Justice for
Justice.
Stoltzfus. I'm so
He
happy for
loves
him,
it.
man.
35%,
Dude, and
maybe.
honestly,
What do you think Gastelum makes? 250?
more. Dude, this is the
Three-
shocking thing. I'm pretty sure he makes 4.
35%.
He's been in the UFC so long.
Life-changing
I
money.
think he
Let's
makes
go.
4, bro.
Let's
Dude,
go,
Dustin
Dustin
Stoltzfus, people were like, he should have canceled the fight. He's like, are you fucking crazy?
What a king. What a king. If it was against a bum, I get it.
Oh, man, here we go. They're introducing Gable out of the red corner, guys. I will say
Jones
this.
in the crowd.
He's looking slim. He's looking fit. I will say Gable normally, right?
Much
Packs
smaller.
a little bit more, thickness. I'll just say, watching him wrestle, guys, he's normally a little bit thicker. And right now, it does look like he's slimmed down considerably, probably working on that cardio.
Here we go. This is my first time doing a live cast of any fight or a live commentary of anything. So I'm excited.
I absolutely love it, brother. People love normally when we do this on the show, and typically we only do it for the UFC because nothing else is as big or as interesting. But right now, we got the biggest prospect in MMA taking on another very big man. Anything can happen. Here we
already with
go.
the takedown. 20 seconds in. Some big ground and pound from Gable Stevenson here. And half guard here.
Dude, he went with that snatch
Big
single.
elbow.
So efficient on energy. Cost him nothing.
Yeah, he's holding position here in half guard, and he's landing some big shots here, big elbows from the top.
He threatened
position.
with that head and arm choke, and then you saw him get to work with the ground and pound right away. Love to
Americana. He's threatening with the Americana here from side control. Oh, wait, from half guard. What the? Okay, he just gave up on it there. Questionable. That is not a submission you really see from half guard, but okay.
You know what's interesting, man? It looks almost like Thomas Peterson. If you've ever watched Thomas Peterson, I would, Evan, but it's on Fight Pass, and unfortunately, they will freaking nuke my channel from the sky if I showed this on
big ground
on the
and
air.
pound. Oh my goodness!
But I hope that you guys can tune in. Yeah. Oh, Gable right now, guys, is opening up with ground and pound.
Stood up. Now he's just landing big shots. I think they're gonna stop this fight within a couple seconds. Ref is getting closer. Look here. Yep, this fight's over. He's about to end it. Yep, fight is over. Gable Stevenson, first round knockout via ground and pound. Dominant.
He made that look so easy, guys. Just a absolute smothering. You guys will see it on social media 60 seconds from now. It'll all be over just that quick. Gable left absolutely no doubt. The better man. The snatch single was easy. The control from top half guard was simple. Then he looks for that, submission basically to open the guy up, get some looser frames, passes to the full mount. And guys, he just stood up in the full mount, right? I would say against a better leg locker, maybe you'd be careful about that. But otherwise, dude, it was just a absolute destruction on every level. If you guys watch, if you guys watch Insider MMA content, a destruction on every level. Brutal.
What a great interview.
Yeah. Dude, yeah, I'm so glad that we had a chance to do that, guys. We'll get right back to the action, but that was sick, and we would have been totally distracted from our breakdowns otherwise. He's probably going to cut a sick promo as well. If you talk about guys that maybe only need, 3 or 4 fights on the regionals before they get that call up to the UFC, I think he's definitely going to qualify. But I also believe, for his own sake, he should try and get 3, 4, 5 fights under the LFA banner, get some real experience, get one tough guy on the road there, but go get paid, son. Go get your money. And happy to just see wrestling's had a couple of tough ones lately, right? Like Bo Nickel goes down in a heap and Aaron Pico knocked out cold. Gable Stevenson, one for the boys. I know it's not on the same level. We needed that. All right. We need to stop the bleeding, get one back on the board for wrestling. So shout out to Gable Stevenson for doing the damn thing.
My brother Evan, you see me live from the Pendulum view right now.
Oh my goodness, dude. Unbelievable. We've got freaking new camera angles and everything on the show. You never know what to expect here, guys. Speaking of 191 pounds for Kelvin Gastelum, they should cut this guy, man. I'm normally the guy who's like, hey, let's let's give it on, let's give you a little bit of that benefit of the doubt. Let's be fair. Let's give these guys some understanding. The guy should be a 170-pound fighter. The guy has routinely leveraged, short notice situation. Hey, push the weight up, this and that. And he's missed weight plenty of times. But dude, this one just feels like low effort, flexing on the scale at 191 pounds. He missed the weight by a mile. It's just cheating. And it's just a guy that doesn't want to be here and, kind of being lazy about it all and never showing his best product. So for me, he's taking up a spot now in the UFC and he doesn't deserve it anymore. On the other side, Dustin Stoltzfus, not the best UFC fighter you've ever seen, but things that jump off the page here, dude, he's the way bigger man. You just watch these guys next to each other, despite the fact that he made the weight like a professional, he's much bigger than Kelvin, and when you talk about how Kelvin has looked like an amateur in some of his fights, it's when guys mix it up with him on the ground and show black belt level credentials. Kelvin sometimes looks really foolish, like the Jack Hermanson fight where he got instantly submitted there. And when I just look at this fight, there's way more upside for me on a guy like Dustin Stoltzfus, who's probably fighting for his job at plus 205. And, again, he's got 3 wins in the UFC. He's probably a class below Kelvin. But did Kelvin train for this fight? I can't imagine that a guy who's showing up to train every day, twice a day, is looking like Kelvin Gastelum on the scales. I don't believe that, right? Even if you didn't manage weight, you wouldn't look like that, it's just not how it would be. So for me, Kelvin is training at most once a day, probably 3 times a week. Just doesn't strike me as a guy who's really committed to this lifestyle. And meanwhile, Dustin Stoltzfus on the other side looks jacked. He looks like a guy who had to cut some weight to make this weight. He looks like a guy who's probably going to show up for this fight weighing 205 pounds. And when you look at all those things combined, it's who do I think is the better, striker? Kelvin, but he's given up size. Who do I think is the better wrestler? Probably by credentials, Kelvin, but who do I think is going to wrestling practice? Dustin. And it's who do I think can go out there and make this guy work? By the way, look at a common opponent, Joe Pyfer. I know that it's kind of a meme, but Dustin Stoltzfus picked the guy up, the guy based out his arm and snapped it in half. In a fight where Dustin Stoltzfus picked up that big ass dude, turned him sideways and went for a takedown, right? What the hell did Kelvin do? He mostly got beat up. And then when Joe got, tired, he couldn't do anything about it. So for me, I just look at this fight and I'm Dustin Stoltzfus, I think, cares more. I think he's going to try harder. And those things, when you're the bigger guy and you probably are the better grappler, those things can matter. So for me, man, I'm team never Kelvin at this stage. We've seen him lose basically a non-entity decision. I'm going back to look to make sure I don't speak out of turn here. But to Darren Till, right? Split decision, guys. This was all the way back in 2019, and he just did nothing, right? So, we've seen fights that he'll go out there and do nothing. We've seen fights where he goes out there and barely ekes one by. We've seen fights where Sean Brady audits him in literally every position for the duration of the fight. I just don't believe in this guy at a UFC level anymore. And a guy who prepares like a UFC fighter, cares like a UFC fighter, wants to be here, wants to exchange, wants to take risks. I don't believe in any of that. So I think Kelvin might knock him out by accident because he was a good athlete and a good fighter. But I really don't think about, him being at this level anymore. Wiz, what do you think, my brother?
Does Kelvin Gastelum have something on the UFC? Does he have some dirt on the UFC? How is he still part of the roster after all of these weight misses? Either he has
a Hall of Fame fight versus Adesanya. That's it.
Is this guy in debt? Does he still need to fight? Why is he not training and missing weight and still fighting if he doesn't want to? Or do the UFC have something on him and they're oh, we have something on you. You have to fight for us even though you're going to miss weight. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I think Dustin Stoltzfus is going to be able to take Gastelum down every here and there, and then it's just going to be a slow, tepid kickboxing fight for 3 rounds. I think this fight goes to distance, and I think Dustin Stoltzfus by decision is a decent look. That's the only thing I'd bet on this fight. I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot rod. It's very hard to read, especially with the weight miss, and I just think that's more of a negative on Kelvin than anything. So I'm going to go Dustin Stoltzfus, dog or pass.
How about this, dude? Kelvin Gastelum hasn't knocked anybody out since Michael Bisping in 2017. So he's not very dangerous. And then you just look like my article prediction was either fighter via split decision or Dustin Stoltzfus via sub. Because like I could see him just being way better on the ground and kind of taking Kelvin's lunch money, or I could see it being a tepid decision in either direction. But I just find it hard to believe in this day and age that Kelvin's like levels above and just going to show levels. It's like, when's the last time Kelvin Gastelum showed levels in a fight? Like, it doesn't really happen, you know? So for me, Kelvin's just not a buying commodity for me at this point in his career.
All
right, man. Next up, I was a little bit surprised to see that Rafa Garcia was like one of the, popular underdogs this week on a DFS perspective. He's taking on 37-year-old Jared Gordon here. So, I guess I see where people are coming from a little bit, but I'll kick it to you first here, brother Wizz. What do you think about this fight? I have plenty to say about my fellow New York brother, Jared Gordon.
I think Jared Gordon has, suffered the consequence of bad judging time and time again and bad officiating. It's quite unfortunate. I mean, obviously the Patty fight, we all think he deserved to win. In the Hotbrust fight, very close. I think a lot of people did think he won that as well. The no contest against Bobby Green, I think that was quite unfortunate as well. So I really think that Jared Gordon has performed quite well in the UFC. Nonetheless, he is 37 years old. So that is a concern. And Rafa Garcia is someone who on the feet really doesn't offer too much, doesn't have the best of games. His striking isn't really all that good and put together. He's mainly a wrestler. He's going to go out there and look to take Jared Gordon down. But Jared's wrestling defense is pretty decent. So I think he's going to be able to keep this fight standing. And if he does, he should be able to cruise to a decision here against Rafa Garcia, probably 30-27. But if he starts to gas out and Rafa gets the takedowns late in the fight, maybe that could pose a threat. Also, 37 years old, maybe this is where Jared Gordon starts to underperform or loses durability. That is quite the age where you start to, lose a step. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened either. At these odds, I would probably just stay away altogether, but I do think Jared Gordon comes away with the win here. Just not really confident in betting anything in this fight.
Yeah, man. One thing I wanted to note, only one finish in the UFC for Rafa Garcia, and it was against Jesse Ronson. Jesse Ronson 0-5 in the UFC. So tough look, right? I think Ronson was only finished twice in those 5 losses, so that's a feather in his cap. But what would you say if I told you that the only person that Rafa Garcia, excuse me. I caught myself, Tim Troiano. Don't worry. Shout out to brother Tim. Rafa Garcia, the non-Brazilian gentleman. Would you believe me if I told you his only win over somebody who's still on the roster was Natan Levy in 2021? By the way, Natan Levy signed since 2020. He's had 4 fights in the UFC. The guy just doesn't fight very often. So when you look, man, like, he's beaten a bunch of guys that all went on to get cut from the UFC that were all not very good. Vince Pichel retired, right? Good fighter, just was well past his peak, right? Both him and Clay Guida were in their 40s when Rafa Garcia was able to defeat them. Clay Guida no longer with the UFC. Oh, my guy Moy said Levy got cut. Okay, so literally he does not have a win over anybody on the UFC roster. That's what you need to know about Rafa Garcia. And he's lost to Chris Grutzmacher, which is a really concerning loss, right? So, like, to have no real credible wins, a really concerning loss. Jared Gordon on the other side, guys, he has lost to Nasrat Hakparas via split decision, Paddy Penwit via controversial decision, Grant Dawson via rear naked choke, and Charles Oliveira via uppercut in the first round since 2019. And I believe he got fouled against Charles. So it's like, you look at Jared Gordon, he's had a very good body of work overall. And like, he's 9-6 in the UFC with real wins over real guys that are still on the roster, knocking out Thiago Moises, which is like not an easy thing to do. And then I compare that to, Rafa Garcia, who I don't think has done anything really in the UFC at this point. And for me, Rafa's also dealt with injuries, not been as active. So the youth the ability to keep a decent pace, those are like the two things that he's got going for him. Decent durability as well. But like even Grant Dawson, I felt like he had a more honest fight with Jerry Gordon than when he just destroyed Rafa Garcia and literally beat him to shreds as well. So like he took a lot of damage in that fight. He had a knee injury. He's kind of been set back by that. So for all those reasons, like I'm just not really sold on Rafa Garcia. But I will note he's got the flag. He's going to come out ready to fight. He's got the spirit, corazon, right? There's some positives about him. I just think like in this matchup, he's normally relying on wrestling, grappling as his source of victory. And it's like Jerry Gordon is a solid grappler. Very difficult to just easily out wrestle him and outmaneuver him. Paddy Pimblett has been submitting a lot of guys, dominating guys on the ground. Did he dominate Jerry Gordon on the ground? Not at all. So I will say, shout out to that though. Dogfather is a very sharp guy. And he's the younger guy. Like, could he come out here and clip Jerry Gordon on the chin, who's always been on the chinnier side of things? I think that's certainly possible. But then you look at Rafa Garcia, doesn't have a lot of knockouts. So like, unless he's going to pace grapple Jerry Gordon, which very few people have done, then I just think he's going to be in a hard fight. To be honest, I looked at Dustin and he is just kind of bad. Interesting. All right. Well, next up, my man.
Pretty, significant improvements than his early UFC run.
For sure. I agree with that as well. And also just like looking at the guys he's lost to, they're almost always guys that just have a wrestling and grappling advantage over him. And like all of them, I think, have winning records in the UFC. I'd have to fact check myself there, but they're all pretty damn good as well. He's lost a good competition. All right, man. Next up, we got Rob Font taking on David Martinez. And David Martinez was supposed to fight somebody else, right? And then he got the opportunity. Raul Rosas Jr. pulls out. Hey, opportunity knocks, and now let's see what happens, right? Rob Font, talk about, guys getting up there in age. He's 38 years of age. So that's certainly a concern coming in here. Big age gap with Martinez, the younger guy who's got some knockout power, guy who's got some ability, guy who's got good leg kicks as well. So there's definitely things to like about Martinez. But on the other side, like Rob Font, I think he's looked almost career best in his recent fights out of TriStar, just knowing how to win fights, knowing how to win optics, knowing how to earn a decision that's close. Those have been things that have eluded him at times, and he's been showing a great product in that regard. But the one thing that it's hard to overcome is the fact that he, at the best of times, can get clipped on the chin a little bit, and now he's 38 years of age. We've talked about it before. The book Fightnomics talks about the precipitous decline in guys, basically the loss by KO skyrockets after their 38th birthday. So you definitely have to be worried about that with a guy like Font who's willing to engage in a striking fight. But I think if anybody has wrestling and grappling upside in this fight, it's Font. He's also the larger fighter. He's had way more UFC experience, fought better quality competition, and he's beaten the much better guys as well. So for all those reasons, I think it's understandable why Rob Font is a favorite. Now, he was a bigger favorite earlier in the week. I'm going to pull up fight odds just to have a point of comparison. So Rob Font opens minus 170, guys. He instantly shoots up to minus 210. So the early market steam was on Rob Font. Then the market buys all the way back down. And now we're sitting at Rob Font minus 115 on Bet Online. So it opened up minus 170, peaked minus 210. It's back at minus 115 for Rob Font. So obviously sharp money came in on David Martinez. I think if you got Martinez plus 200, plus 170, like these big numbers, I think that's totally justifiable. But when you're looking at, Martinez now at like a pick'em price with Rob Font, that does seem very presumptuous to me when a guy like Rob Font not only has shown he can knock out prospects like Adrian Yanez, a guy who's 6-3 in the UFC, a guy who can go out there and put up 100 fantasy points in a loss, right? Against Chito Vera, he landed so many strikes that he put up 100 plus fantasy points, and he lost that fight over 5. So Rob Font can throw serious volume against anybody. He's very difficult to outland over 15 minutes on volume, right? And you look at like Martinez normally likes to operate from kicking range, which is easier to do when you're the bigger guy. And it's going to be harder to do when Rob Font's getting after you with that jab all night. So it just seems to me like a fight that's an honest fight where I would probably trust the experience of Rob Font to be the biggest difference maker. But I will also acknowledge Martinez by KO at a big plus money number is a way to get involved that, plays into the fact, man, Rob's never been stopped with strikes, but he's been very close to being stopped with strikes before. Guys kind of let him off the hook when they've hurt him in the past. And I feel like Martinez maybe is able to finish the job there if he's able to land a big shot. So that's the way I see this fight, man. It's like if I like the Martinez side, I would have taken the early numbers, or I would have taken that KO prop at a big plus money number. Otherwise, I don't really like, his side in this one. And meanwhile, I think Rob Font is one of these guys where in 9 of his 12 UFC wins, he's put up 100 points on DFS. That means he's doing shit constantly. That means he's going out there and landing strikes, being active, putting things in people's faces, getting knockdowns. So Rob Font is a guy that can be hurt. He can be damaged. He doesn't always wear damage great, right? Swollen eye, things like this. But he beats the shit out of guys too, man. He lands big shots. He gets respect from guys. He hurts them. He's got good quality wins. So I feel like Rob Font, at New England Cartel, he was one guy. I think at TriStar MMA, he's an even better fighter and a tougher out for these guys. And John Matsumoto's got a great guillotine. He's got, an ability to wrestle. He's got an ability to strike on the feet. He can kind of mix it up everywhere. And Martinez, for me, is just a little bit more one note in his approach. So do not be surprised, in my opinion, if Firas Zahabi, the genius of MMA, tells this guy, hey, shoot a takedown or two, put it in the back of this guy's mind, make him slow down on those kicks. And by the way, Rob Font's been working diligently on that jiu-jitsu. What if he's able to posture up, land some ground and pound, maybe change this kid's attitude early on in the fight? I think those are all possible ways that Rob Font looks like, a deserved favorite in this one. So the age is a concern. The durability is a concern. But body of work, skills, attributes, what he's proven, I think Rob Font is a guy that when he flips the plus money, which I assume he will in this matchup, I think he's the guy you got to consider when it flips, because he's a very serious fighter, and at plus money, he's definitely, been a worthy commodity recently. Fought hard for your dollar against Matsumoto, even punched him right off that glove touch, man. He'll do scumbag old veteran tricks. That's fine. Rob Font gets down like that. What do you think of this one, Wiz?
Yeah, I was quite shocked. I saw the line on this one a little bit later in the week, and I saw that it was pretty much pick 'em at one point. And I was kind of puzzled. Like, I understand that Martinez is a powerful striker, younger. This dude is smart. He's a doctor and, outside of the cage. So you would like to assume that the IQ is pretty high. But what he presents is, a good, decent cooking game, has some power, and likes to keep the fight standing. Have we forgotten who Rob Font is? Like, I understand he's been hurt and he's suffered like a broken orbital before, not the greatest of injuries, especially as a fighter. But the dude has range. The dude is a really freaking good boxer. And even when he gets hurt, he has the ability of dogging it out and staying in there and hanging in there and finding a way to get back into the fight. So I think this is Rob Font's fight to lose. And I think if he pressures Martinez early and he's the one that is landing his jab, is putting Martinez on the back foot and, cutting off the cage, he's going to present a lot of problems to Martinez. And, I think at some point maybe he hurts Martinez later on in the fight too. So give me Rob Font. I think he wins this fight pretty convincingly.
There you have it, my man. So we're both seeing it the same way. I will say, like, again, price is everything for me when I break down these MMA fights. Like, I don't think Rob Font should be minus 200 based on my concerns. But do I think minus 150 was fair? Like, yeah, I think that probably makes sense. Like, there's a tipping point on every matchup where the line value flips. So, yeah, you get Martinez plus 175 and you want to take a speculative investment. I think that's fair. But when you're talking about laying chalk with a guy that has one win in the UFC against a guy who's really not on the level, then you want to kind of take a step back and say, am I getting suckered in? Could I find myself having bought wolf tickets on Sunday morning? You never want to be in that position, right? And so I feel like in this fight, it would be Rob Font or pass for me at these current numbers based on what we've seen. Last but not least, my brother, we've got two guys that are trying to make this featherweight division fun again. We've got Diego Lopes, and this is a guy I bet at plus 660 when he first came to the UFC against Movsar Evloev. Everybody's like, who is this guy? Funny haircut. And he said on the promo, you will remember my name, right? He was like, I promise you this, you will remember my name. And now everybody knows Diego Lopes, man. His name rings out. He's done a great job. Yitro in the chat says the community's not talking about Silva's weaknesses, only Diego. Interesting. We'll get there, man. We'll try and talk about everybody's weaknesses, and strengths. But what I want to do, my man, is I want to flip it over to you first. We got the main event to break down. We got Diego Lopes coming in off a title loss, but did get a knockdown against Alexander the Great Volkanovski. Gene Silva, meanwhile, he has all the momentum in the world, right? 5-0 in the division, I should say 4-0 in the division, even went out and knocked out Drew Dober, right? He cut him open, but still got the TKO stoppage against Drew Dober up a weight class. So Gene Silva's been nothing but aces since he got to the UFC, but now he's got his most difficult test. It could be for this number one contendership. How do you see this one playing out?
This is a step up in competition for Gene Silva. Diego Lopes is, I'll break down both fighters too in just terms of style specifically too. Lopes is someone who in the striking is quite wild. I do like Lopes as a fighter, and I've bet him quite a lot. I think my biggest bet in my MMA handicapping career, I think it was Diego Lopes against Brian Ortega, just money line at -170, I believe it was. I also had a lot of money on KO1 and was pretty upset at the outcome there. I thought I had it in the bag.
Knocked him out, woke him back up. Brutal.
That was so brutal. So I've been a big fan of Lopes, and I'm quite familiar with his game. In the pocket, he is there to be hit. And I think that is something that could play to his downfall in this fight. Now, on the other hand, Gene Silva is someone who wants to enter the pocket, someone who wants to hang in there and stands tall. He doesn't really look to work a lot with his footwork and cut angles. He will stay in there in the pocket and move his head around and start to strike from different angles, which is something that I think is a good counter to that weakness that I mentioned with Diego Lopes. Because in the pocket, we saw Volkanovski land a lot. Even against Brian Ortega in the third round, he was landing quite a bit of strikes there in the pocket. Against Dan Ige in the third round when he started to gas out, it's not the best of looks. So I do think that Gene Silva will be able to land the power strikes here early and often. And the one difference in the run that Gene Silva has compared to Diego Lopes' run is Diego Lopes, he kind of, I would say, fought people who were on the way out. You look at the guys he's fought, and Brian Ortega, someone who kind of lost his durability and is no longer taking MMA seriously, I would say. Dan Ige was on short notice, and he almost had him out in the third round. Sadiq Youssef, who was, I believe, off of a long layoff and has shown to be chinny as of recent. Pat Sabatini, chinny. So you compare.
Otherwise, that's a good win over Pat, but I agree with you. That is like
it is a great win over Pat, but the way he won was an early round one knockout, where if you are touching someone's chin, and it's Pat Sabatini specifically, if you're touching his chin like that early on, you're gonna knock him out. And I was on Pat Sabatini in that fight, so I felt the pain. And you look at Gene Silva's run, Weston Wilson, all right, whatever. Charles Jourdain, someone who I believe at the time he has never been finished until then. Drew Dober, someone who is extremely durable and ate a ton of shots from Gene Silva, and Gene Silva didn't really show to gas out at all. And then Melsick, someone I believe who was not finished at all since. Why am I fumbling words? Someone who has not been finished at all until Gene Silva finished him. And then Bryce Mitchell, he just dog walked him. So that's the one thing I will say about Gene Silva's run in the UFC. His striking is impeccable, and I think that his takedown defense is pretty good. Although Diego Lopes is not someone who's going to show a lot of takedowns in his fights. He doesn't really take people down, but if the fight goes down to the mat, he will excel in the jiu-jitsu. I would say all this to say I think Gene Silva wins the fight. I think he wins via knockout. I think it's under 2.5 rounds. I just think that the hole in Diego's game is going to, show to be too much. And I think he's a little bit too emotional just reacting to a lot of the stuff that I've seen in the media. And that's just not a good look either. So give me Gene Silva here.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna lean in the same direction, but I am gonna just say like the price for me is a tiny bit prohibitive here. When I look at Diego Lopes, he's a guy that I'm always considering at a plus money number, just in terms of like how his style is. Like he's a guy that I feel can crack almost anybody on the chin because he's willing to take risks. He throws with a lot of power, and he's also a guy that he finds these short windows of opportunity. So I think, for example, in that fight with Pat Sabatini, Pat tried to crash into the clinch. He tried to grab a hold of him. And what you saw was, an ability to kind of, push away in the clinch, create this small amount of space, and then fill up, that space with the uppercut. So Lopez did a very good job of, basically creating a space for himself and then closing it with the uppercuts, closing it with his hooks. He does a good job finding those knockout opportunities, right, and creating them, setting them up. When I look at this matchup in particular, I think Gene Silva, the things that he does that are really impressive, he frames uppercuts. He does a very good job of creating space with his hand, then finding the uppercut behind that. So Diego Lopez, he might use a little bit more of that, pushing away in the clinch and then use that to create space. Gene Silva instead will like frame off and then look for these short uppercuts. That's how he finished Charles Jourdain. And I will note, Charles Jourdain had been submitted once before against Julian Erosa. He had never been finished with strikes. Then you look back at another guy, the Armenian fellow, you just mentioned his name, Melsik, right? Melsik had been submitted before. He'd never been finished with strikes. So Gene Silva is finding the button on guys that had never been stopped with strikes before, right? And that's an impressive look from him. Then he goes out there against Bryce Mitchell. And the thing that blew me away there was that he was basically summarily out-grappling Bryce Mitchell over the course of that fight. Like, he not only got a very deep guillotine bite in the first round, he finished him with the ninja choke in the second round. So I think that, he's now sent two guys packing from this weight class. Like, literally two guys were like, yeah, I don't need to do this shit anymore. Like, I'm going down to 135. I'm going to look for greener pastures. So the thing about Diego Lopez is he's big. He's 5'11", right? 72.5-inch reach. He's going to be a very big man out there. And the thing that I think could be a difference maker for Lopez is if his wrestling has come around. And what I mean by that is if this guy has been working with these Oklahoma State guys for the last year and he's been putting in the time and the effort in that wrestling phase of the game, he's got the size and the physicality that could be a huge difference maker for him. He's got a brilliant game from his guard, right? But a guard game in MMA is kind of a dangerous thing, right? It leads to you being underneath. It leads to you taking a lot of damage. One thing I'll say about Gene Silva is he's very punishing from the top position, right? I think he was looking for the ref to stop it against Melsik and he wouldn't do it. So he just started ripping that guy's body in pieces, right? Like you just watch, he's a very sadistic fighter from the top position. So you do not want to end up underneath him as far as I'm concerned. You'd rather be in the top position, make this guy work, make him sweat, put a little doubt in his mind. That would be what I would be encouraging Lopez to do. And so if he's able to go out there and mix in those takedowns, then it could be a fight where he looks better than his price tag, right? But if he's just going to engage with this guy on the feet, I think what Volkanovski realized is like, if I make this about who's the more technical striker, I will win. Right. So he realized, like, man, if this is a fight, if this comes down to who's grittier in the pocket and who's going to land bigger shots, like, I don't want to be in that fight with this guy. He hurt me. I don't want to find out more about that. So he just then made it about who can be more technical, who can move on the outside. And the thing about Volk, if you had to criticize a great champion, he's just not the most devastating finisher you've ever seen. Right. When he finishes guys, he needs to get the top position. He needs to beat him up with ground and pound, wear on them heavy. And with Diego Lopez, like, do you really want to take that guy to the ground? Like, probably not, right? So he just stood on the feet with him, looked for his shots. I remember Max Holloway looked like he was checked out in rounds 3, 4, and 5 against Volk. The last time that they fought, he still couldn't take him out of there because he hurt his hand. And, Max is a tough guy and Volk just doesn't have that much hitting power. So when I look at Diego Lopez, like, I felt like he didn't show that he got fatigued. He didn't get tired or something out there, right? But what he did do against Volk was he just didn't do enough. Right, he kind of paced himself, and you can't really do that at the highest levels. Gene Silva, for me, fights like an absolute crazy man. He fights like a guy who's not afraid to get tired, who's not afraid of anything, right? He's difficult to put away, right? You look at the fact he's never been finished, and this is a guy where he's going to fight you hard. Kevin Vallejos landed some good shots early. A lot of guys get dissuaded by that. They back down. He just was like, you know what? It's time to make the adjustments. Came back out, started pressuring Vallejos back. And, Vallejo started to feel that. He started to get a little bit more fatigued. So when I look at Diego Lopes prior to the UFC and some of the fights that he had that were a little bit scary, right? It was the fights where guys were able to, mix it up with him in the wrestling, or guys that were able to defend a couple submission attempts, guys that were able to do some damage to his body. He's a big, tall guy, right? Big, long-bodied guy. You can kind of rip some body shots there. And I think Gene Silva just has a little bit more variety in his strikes. Like, I think he's going to do a little bit more of his, kicks from the outside. I think he's going to try and mix in some boxing to the body in this fight because he's a shorter statured guy. And I also think that if Lopes is wrestling, he needs to prioritize quick finishes. If you get in on these shots on Gene Silva and you don't take him down, that's where Weston Wilson got clipped. That's where, Charles Jourdain got clipped, right? They tried to wrestle, right? You'd think against this guy, you got to wrestle. That's when he's framing off the uppercuts and finding big success. So I've seen Gene Silva take damage before, right? Like that Kevin Vallejos fight, he was kind of getting touched up a little bit. He was willing to exchange with Drew Dober as well. But I feel like Gene Silva is one of these guys that just has some star qualities, right? Like the barking, the celebrating, the scary knockouts, the ability to go out there and submit Bryce Mitchell and kind of show levels to his game. I feel like Diego Lopes is in this tough spot where we talked about it many times, guys. A letdown fight after a title loss. It's like, this isn't as big for him. He definitely wants to win, right? He's definitely still motivated, but he saw the mountaintop. He got his opportunity and he fell short. So now all his momentum squashed, hit the ground like a, boulder. Gene Silva, he's on the rise. He's got 5 wins in a row. He's feeling like he's an unstoppable force right now. The win over Vallejos is aging well. The win over Bryce Mitchell, he goes back and responds, gets another win. So you're like, man, this guy Gene Silva is basically making a great case for himself to be the number 1 contender. Lerone Murphy, great case to be the number 1 contender. But the only guy who can jump the line is not Diego Lopes. And by the way, if I'm the UFC and I want to give Diego Lopes an easier fight, I would have given him Yair Rodriguez and said, go out there and get to your takedowns. Go out there and get to your top position, right? Show levels on the grappling, right? But they didn't get that Yair fight booked. And I think, now he's got a hard fight, man. Gene Silva's a tough guy. So, again, it's a big price on Silva. Not necessarily thinking it's value at minus 245. But I think that Gene Silva wins more often than not. I do think more often than not he does it via knockout. I think the decision's possible. Both these guys are, in my opinion, well-conditioned athletes, broadly speaking, that are going to come in, and try and give their best over 5 rounds. But the damage that Gene Silva can cause, I think it is very difficult to sustain for 5 rounds. And like, we've seen things like a cut stoppage for him. We've seen him go out there and submit guys. We've seen him go out there and knock guys dead. And those are the kind of things where he's shown a variety of different ways he can win fights at this level. And I don't think that it's out of question he can win a decision either. Against Vallejos, round 1 was his worst round. Rounds 2 and 3, he picked up the pace. And, if that had been a 5-round fight, I'm not sure that would have went very well for Vallejos, honestly. Like, now maybe a different story. But I think for me, fun fight, great scrap. 2 guys I'm super excited about. But Diego Lopes is in, a tough spot here. So he's got to go out there and show that he's made those improvements in the wrestling, and then I'll see how it goes. What do you think, man?
Oh, I broke this one down first, but this is a very compelling fight. I'm really excited to see how this one goes, and I've had this marked in the calendar for quite some time. I'm a big Diego Lopes fan, but I do think this is, kind of where the tread meets the road, as one would say. I think Gene Silva is going to be able to find a knockout. Just every time I watch a tape on Lopes, that opening he has when he's rolling, it's just too evident. And Gene Silva over the top is money.
Fair play, my man. I'm looking right now just to see what the props look like in this fight. And I'm seeing Lopes by submission is plus 700. Lopes by KO is plus 700. Lopes by decision is plus 700. So you can take your pick on the Lopes side, right? They'll basically give you plus 700 any way you want to do it. Meanwhile, Silva by sub has gotten nuked, guys, from where it used to be. I think it was like 20-something to 1 against Bryce Mitchell. Now you're looking at 12 to 1 best available. Yuck. Because I don't think he's submitting Diego Lopes unless Lopes is extremely tired. So Silva by KO is a horrible price as far as I'm concerned. You kind of just got to let this one go, I feel. If you like Silva, unless you want to get more specific, like my guy Evan, KO 2-3, fair enough. But yeah, I think Silva probably by knockout, and I don't think the prices are great. That's what we've got. So my brother Wiz, I want to kick it to you, my man. Anything that you got to tell the people, anything you want to get off your chest, anything you got going on, my brother, the floor is yours. It's been a great show.
Yeah, this has been a really fun show, and I always like when we do this on Friday nights. I'm not sure why. It's just it feels like there's a different vibe. Everyone's off because it's the weekend starts now, and we can always have a little bit more fun. We have more of a read because of the weigh-ins as well. Things have developed, lines have developed, but it's always fun breaking down fights with you guys. Please, if you haven't already, please leave a like on the video, and you can follow me at Wizz MMA everywhere. I'm looking forward to this week off from the UFC, but we do have the Contender Series coming up, so not a week off completely from MMA, and I'm sure we have some regionals. I haven't even looked forward yet that far, but good luck to everybody tomorrow. Let's cash some tickets.
Absolutely, my man. Absolutely. I fired up to, finish up my betting strategy guide and everything tonight. Still, the job's never done, right? So back to work for me. But I will say, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you to everybody for stopping by. I wanted to say thank you to everybody for the understanding. Earlier this week, had it scheduled and everything, but whether it was me or we both just kept having a couple things that we ran into. That's life. But we'll always try and get out the show before crunch time for you guys. So if it's DFS, if it's whatever, trying to give you some different reads. Hopefully it helps your process. If you guys are interested in any more from either one of us, all of our descriptions, all of our information rather is down in the description box below. And that's all that we got for you guys today. So thank you to the sharpest chat in the game. God bless you guys. Good luck on UFC Noche, and come back next week because we're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody. Take care.